Welcome to another episode of African Mindset series. Today we're going to discuss an important topic which is close to my heart because it's as pervasive as it is pernicious, and it's also a stumbling block to the emancipation of African people and Black people in general in our quest to develop our continent and to take our place at the table as equal partners to the rest of the world. So let's get straight into it. The topic we are discussing today is colonized mindset. Whilst it's not going to be a treatise on the subject, we're going to touch on some nuggets which will kickstart the conversation, hopefully raise awareness, and you could, if you could share and propagate, and let's all delve into this. So let's be conscious about it so we can do something about it. So the key areas I'm going to cover today will be, colonized mindset. First of all, what is it? Then we move on to, the history, how we got to where we are, very briefly. Then we touch on how it manifests itself. And then as a final point, we're going to touch on the things we can do to free ourselves from it. So let's get straight into it. Colonized mindset, what is it? In my estimation, I view colonized mindset as an internalized feeling of inferiority when we as Africans compare ourselves to the rest of the world, or to other cultures, to other people, primarily to Europeans. We tend to see our cultural values, our values, our belief system, our culture, and everything that's African as inferior to theirs. So we need to understand how it all started, how it manifests itself, and how finally we can break free from it. So where did it all start? I mean, we could go as far back as slavery. When the Europeans first came to Africa, and then the transatlantic slave trade, which was very devastating for the continent, due to its sheer scale and the savagery of it all, the sheer scale over a short period of time, and the way Africans were dehumanized in order to justify the slave trade, because Africans were deemed to be less than, they were deemed to be savages. At least that's how it was sold to Europeans at home, that actually enslaving an African is almost like doing them a favor, taking them out of the jungle where they were, as it was, and taking them to Europe, doing them a favor, taking them to the Americas or to the Caribbean. So there were a lot of lies and fabrication made in order to dehumanize Black people in the eyes of other Europeans. That's the 15th century is where the whole idea of race became a thing, because before, Blacks, white Africans used to go to Europe. In fact, there were Africans, the Moors were in Europe, and some would argue they civilized Europe, Spain at the time. But people were not distinguished based on color. There were other things like social class, etc., that used to distinguish people. Color was never a thing until the 15th century, when the slave trade began. And, it was also a way to create solidarity amongst white people versus Black people, and stop the slaves from escaping from plantations. So there were all sorts of issues which encouraged, or which stemmed from the dehumanization of Black people for commerce, really, in order to develop European and North American societies and countries. So the consequences continue to live with us today. And obviously it didn't stop there. They then compounded it with colonization. And colonization was an extension of slavery. But this time, they actually came and installed themselves on the continent. It started with the Berlin Conference, where they formalized the partition and the conquest of Africa. where this idea that African resources did not belong to Africans, and that the destiny of Africans was not for Africans to determine, but for the European masters to determine. So again, the needs of Africans was never at the forefront. It was all about Europeans, and the European leaders also need to justify to their people why colonization and bringing the armies and the administrators into Africa was justified. Again, another way they justified it is this whole notion that they needed to come and civilize Africans. They needed to come and civilize our ancestors. They needed to come and bring education, bring Christianity. So the three pillars of colonization was Christianization, civilization, and commerce. Christianization and civilizations were, if you like, two sides of the same coin, because Christianity was used as a weapon, as a tool of imperialism. It was used as a way to conquer Africa, the indigenous populations, to make them abandon their belief system, to teach them to forgive the people who enslaved them, to bring to them this notion of a white savior. So in order to do that, the indigenous populations had to be told, or had to be encouraged and almost coerced as well, because in some places Christianity was basically introduced through violence. They had to be told that their cultural practices was inferior. Their cultural practices needed to be abandoned. It was savage. It was not compatible with Christianity. And in fact, for Christians to be baptized in those days, they had to take, for Africans to be baptized in those days, they had to take on Christian names. And guess what? All those Christian names were what? French, English, Portuguese. What was wrong with the lovely Africans' name like Olua, Giame, our African names with significant, if you like, spiritual significance. The lovely Nigerian names, what was wrong with those? Yet Africans were forced to take on European names in order to be baptized and accepted in the faith. And I think Chinua Achebe touches on it in Things Fall Apart, where he said, we mocked, we thought the white man was funny when he brought his religion and divided us. But now we know the consequences. So Christianity, as I said, was used as a tool to so-called civilize. But the other side of it was that Africans were made to feel that their own cultural practices, their own way of life was inferior, was something to be despised, was something to look down on. So if you add that to the dehumanization of Africans during the slave trade, you have a recipe for centuries of indoctrination, centuries of brainwashing, centuries of making us feel that we were less than, centuries of making us feel that our cultural practice, there was something wrong with it. There was something wrong with our belief system. There was something wrong with our way of life. Something wrong with the way we were as Africans, which had served us for centuries, in fact, a millennia before then, when Africans ruled the world, where we lived in civilized societies, in societies that were virtually corruption-free, because people were afraid of, immediate repercussions if they stole or disobeyed, or, they were afraid that there will be immediate repercussions because of the way the African system and belief system worked. So we were told to despise all of that. So the consequences are what we see today. I mean, there's a lot more we can delve into when it comes to the history, but I'm going to leave it there because, as I said, this is just to provide some nuggets, and then we can continue the conversation. So this is where it stemmed from, and that's why I say colonization and slavery. I'm hoping I've captured or encapsulated the essence of it. Now, moving on to how this manifests itself today. In various ways. In various ways, when you look at our cultural practices, how we've been heavily influenced by European way of life. In fact, there are some African homes where I hear even Ghana and Nigeria where when the kids are almost rewarded for speaking English or French. And when they speak the indigenous language, they are almost like punished. Isn't that absurd? That our own languages, we look down on it and we promote the white man's language. Are we not still slaves? So we need to look at some of these things, Why do we, for example, feel we need to have a certain hairstyle in order to look presentable, in order to look good? Are we ashamed of the natural hair God has given us? So we need to start questioning why we do certain things. Why do we bleach our skin? Why do some of us bleach our skin in order to look lighter? Is it not an internalized hatred? Why is it that, we give our kids just English or French names and not African names? These are things we need to start asking ourselves. Some of these things, I became conscious of it only in the last few years myself. So there are certain decisions that I made in the past, which I would probably do differently now. But it's something that we need to be conscious about, and which is why I am trying to bring this topic to the fore so we can all think about it. So those are examples that I gave. But when you look at even the curriculum in African schools, what do we teach the kids? In Ghana, for example, they talk about the benefits of colonization. Seriously? Seriously? The benefits of colonization for Africa? No. Colonization did not help Africa in any shape or form. Colonization destroyed the very fabric of African society. Because of the three pillars I gave: civilization, commerce, and as I said, the way Christianity was sold into Africa was done in a way that dehumanized Africans, in a way that demonized African culture, in a way that portrayed Africans as savages, So these are all things that we need to look at. Education system. We did have an education system in Africa long before colonization. The first university in the world was in Africa. So no, thank you. Europeans did not come to educate us. Rather, they came to destroy what was there and replaced it with their own education system, which they thought was superior or better. And yet, we've made no attempt at all to find our roots or to impose our own identity. We've just followed the path that they've laid for us. And this is something we need to start questioning on and unpicking these things. At the very least, we need to look at our curriculum in Africa and look at the sort of things we teach our children. Do we teach our children that Mungo Park came and discovered our rivers? Do we teach our children that European explorers came to discover our mountains? Why do we, for example, name lakes after the very same Europeans who colonized the continent, who caused us so much harm? Why do we not revert to the pre-colonial names, the local names that we had for Lake Victoria, for example? For all the lakes, streets, monuments we have in Africa, maybe it's about time we look at it to decolonize it. So colonized mindset manifests itself in all sorts of ways, and it's the same people, the same among us, who become decision makers, who become politicians. So we need to renew our mindset so that when we are in that position of authority, we are able to make decisions to promote our African identity. So just like I said, another area that colonized mindset can manifest itself is, for example, when you talk about mud houses, for example. A lot of Africans look down on it and think bricks and mortar that we have today is superior to mud house technology. But that's true. That's not true. Mud houses, rammed earth technology is suitable for the African climate. If you go into a mud house right now, in the middle of the heat, at the height of the heat in the afternoon, it's cool inside. So there's a reason why our ancestors used used rammed earth technology to build homes, and we can do wonderful structures with rammed earth technology. I mean, Benin Kingdom, they use rammed earth to build fortified walls, to do all sorts. So we should not look down on our culture. We should not look down on our technology, on our practices. We should rather build on it. Another area which we need to look at is even the food we eat. We used to eat organic food, fruits, vegetables, foods that nourishes the body, foods that are not processed, food that brings health and healing. And yet nowadays, people think unless they're eating a Western diet, unless they're eating a Western diet, they have not arrived. So, hence our addiction to imported food, our addiction to KFC, our addiction to anything that's foreign. We need to go back to our roots. I'm not suggesting that we don't eat foreign food, but I'm saying we need to prioritize homegrown produce. They are normally healthier, they are normally better for us, and they are suited for our climate. There's a reason why we grow mangoes in Africa and they grow apples in Europe. Oils, even the oils we consume, tropical oils like coconut oil, palm oil, these are good oils. I know for a long time we allowed American corporations to influence us into thinking there was something wrong with those oils. These are natural oils, more natural than the sunflower oil and the canola oil, which are all made in factories, and they are not naturally derived. You have to go through a process to extract the oil, whereas palm oil comes straight from the kernel. Coconut oil comes straight from the flesh of the coconut, or however we derive it. So these are the sort of little things, but important things. We need to go back to our source, because in every sphere of our society we seem to have been influenced so that we hate what is indigenous to us, but we value what is foreign. We can appreciate foreign things, but we need to value and celebrate what is indigenous to us so that we can stand with our head high. We can take our seat at the table as an equal partner to the rest of the world. There are various areas that I could have touched on, but I'll leave with the areas that I've just discussed. Hair, dress, even dress style. There's nothing wrong with African fabric. Wearing African fabric, styling it in a way that suits the weather. Why do our men, for example, think they have to wear suits everywhere when we live in 30-degree heat? Meanwhile, you've got African fabrics that you can wear that suits our climate. You see, we need to not follow blindly, but do what suits us as Africans. And within that, we will have that confidence. It will build our confidence. It will help with our self identity, to assert ourselves to the rest of the world. So, in terms of the last part of this discussion, where I wanted us to touch on how we free ourselves from it, I think the first step is awareness. Awareness that we have a problem. Awareness that potentially we all have this ingrained sense of inferiority. And sometimes we don't even realize we have it. Unless we think about it. We think about everything that we are doing. Whether we are doing it for the right reasons or wrong reasons. For example, I mentioned hairstyle. I know as women, we like to switch hairstyles, etc. But are you doing it because you hate your natural hair? Because if you do that, then you have a serious problem of identity. But if you are doing it out of convenience and, you are not doing it because you think looking like a European is the prize or is more beautiful than your beautiful melanated and kinky hair, if you think in a negative way, then that's wrong. But if you're doing it for convenience, like, switching hairstyles, etc. That, so we need to consider why we do certain things. And we also need to look at even the way we dress. Do we dress because we feel we have to look European in order to be something, in order to be somebody, in order to feel confident in ourselves? If that's the case, then we have a problem. So I'm just inviting us to challenge every single thing that we are doing and question the motive behind it. Self-reflection. Do we give favors? Do we think light-skinned women are, for example, more attractive? Why is that? Why is that? Do we think, do we tend to give favors or tend to allow white people who join the queue at the bank or at the restaurant? Do we serve them better than we serve our fellow brothers and sisters? If that's the case, there's a problem. We suffer from a colonial mindset. We need to treat people equally and not look up to certain groups of people. Anyway, I digress. Now back to the point around how do we remedy this. So the way to remedy this is to educate ourselves, to become conscious that we potentially have a problem. Then the second thing that we need to do is to learn our history, understand what pre-colonial Africa used to be like. Because it was an organized society. There were thriving political structures. It was not the mess it is today. So we need to rediscover ourselves as Africans. We need to understand that it's foreign interference that messed us up, that brought in mediocrity, that brought in the humiliation, that brought in that sense of inferiority. So we need to go back. We need to sankofa our real culture, our real identity, find ourselves so that we can stand tall and stand and sit at the table as an equal partner to the rest of the world. And then the last thing is to obviously talk about it, educate each other, encourage each other, and speak out when we find situations where our brothers and sisters are doing things. Sometimes people are not even conscious that they are acting in a way that betrays their colonized mindset. If you go to a bank and a white man comes behind you, and then the black customer service assistant calls them in front of you, you need to speak up. You need to call that out and say, we are all in the queue. Why are you serving this person before me? We need to, be active about it. There's a lot more I can say on this topic, but I think I'm going to leave it here. And because all I wanted was for, to bring this topic to our attention so we can start a conversation. We can continue another time. Thank you for your time. Please comment, please share, please like, please let's grow the community and start these important discussions for the liberation and emancipation of all of us Africans. Thank you.